The hall of the Galactic Council was larger than anything the human envoy had ever seen. Towering columns stretched toward a ceiling that shimmered like liquid crystal, and the walls were adorned with banners of countless species, each one claiming to be the most powerful in the galaxy. Humans were not strangers to alien gatherings. They had diplomats in every corner, but nothing had prepared him for the intensity of this one. Every creature present radiated authority and control. Some had dozens of limbs, others no eyes at all, but all moved with the confidence of centuries of dominance. At the center of the hall, on a raised platform, stood Queen Elthara. She was everything the legends had promised. Her armor gleamed like liquid metal, perfectly fitted, and engraved with symbols that no human could read but which marked centuries of conquest. Her presence commanded silence. Her gaze alone seemed to weigh every being in the room, measuring strength, weakness, and intent. It was said that the queen could paralyze an entire species with a single look, and humans were warned not to make eye contact. Yet the envoy, Lieutenant Marcus Hale, did not flinch. He had trained for years to negotiate with alien civilizations, and he had learned one rule above all: honesty carried more power than fear. He knew that respect was better than flattery, and that sometimes the simplest truth could disrupt centuries of rigid protocol. So when the queen turned her gaze toward the human delegation and her countless advisors stiffened, Marcus stepped forward. He walked with a calm confidence, letting the subtle rhythm of his boots echo in the vast chamber. He paused before the queen, not kneeling, not bowing, just standing tall. A silence fell. The other species shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Marcus took a breath and said, "Your armor is magnificent. You look amazing in it." The queen's eyes widened, and for the first time in centuries she could not respond immediately. Her cheeks tinged with a faint shade of red, a color her people rarely displayed. The courtiers froze. Some had never seen their queen blush. Some were already plotting how to exploit this unexpected vulnerability. Marcus noticed none of this. He continued with a respectful nod. "I do not mean to offend, Your Majesty. I only wanted to speak what I truly think. Humanity has always admired strength expressed with elegance, and your armor is both." It was a small, human gesture, one that most of her species would have considered unnecessary or even foolish. But Marcus understood. He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that conveyed calm assurance, and waited. A murmur ran through the hall. Other delegates leaned closer to each other, speaking in hurried whispers. The human had broken the code. He had spoken openly, without fear, and the most feared being in the galaxy could not respond. This simple act of honesty, this lack of flattery or submission, was unlike anything anyone had seen before. Finally, the queen found her voice, though it was quieter than expected. "You speak freely," she said. Her voice carried the weight of authority, but also an unexpected curiosity. "Your people do not kneel, they do not speak with fear." In her world, power was maintained by dominance, by projecting invincibility. To see a being stand before her without fear was a foreign sight, and yet it was not unpleasant. It was intriguing. Some of her advisors, those who had witnessed the human's words, began to exchange glances. They had predicted anger, confusion, or submission. None had expected admiration. And more importantly, none had predicted that the queen herself would react with hesitation. The hall remained silent for several moments, the weight of history pressing down on every participant. Marcus took a step back, giving the queen space, as was customary in human culture. He knew that pressing the advantage could appear aggressive. Instead, he waited patiently, showing that he could hold his ground without forcing the queen to act. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the queen gestured for him to remain. She did not speak, but the movement was enough. The message was clear. She was not offended, but she was curious. As the council session continued, Marcus noticed that other species had grown tense. Whispers circulated. The human did not bow. The human did not flinch. The human spoke directly to the queen. Some species considered it a challenge, while others began to wonder if humanity's reputation for unpredictability was more than rumor. The meeting progressed, with formal speeches and proclamations, but Marcus's words lingered. Every delegate sensed it, though few would admit it aloud. The human had done something that no one else could. He had unsettled the queen, not through weapons or strategy, but through honesty. Later, when the session concluded, the queen summoned Marcus privately. The chamber emptied, leaving only the human envoy and the queen herself. The doors closed with a sound that resonated like a soft drumbeat. For the first time, Marcus could study the queen without the pressure of 1,000 eyes. She looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and something that resembled amusement. Your people, they value individuality. They value courage expressed without threats. This is rare. When humans face impossible odds, we rely on ingenuity and cooperation, not intimidation. We see potential, not just power. You speak truth without hiding behind ceremony. Why? It was enough to make Marcus aware that he had achieved something remarkable. He had pierced the armor of the galaxy's most formidable ruler, not with weapons or diplomacy, but with human sincerity. That evening, as Marcus returned to his quarters, he thought about the reactions in the council hall. There would be consequences, no doubt. Some species would see humanity as a threat, while others would begin to rethink their assumptions. But he also knew that the Queen herself had been changed, even if only slightly. She had seen a human, not as a subject, not as an envoy, but as a being capable of admiration, respect, and courage without intimidation. Back in her private chambers, the Queen reflected on the encounter. She had ruled with absolute authority for centuries. She had faced armies, negotiated treaties, and crushed rebellions. Yet in the presence of this human, she felt something new, an awareness that strength could be measured not only in conquest but in perception. Her thoughts wandered to the simple words he had spoken. "You look amazing in your armor." There was no hidden meaning, no attempt to manipulate, only recognition. And yet those few words had stirred something within her, a curiosity that she could not suppress. She touched the smooth surface of her chest plate, thinking about the human who had seen her as more than a symbol of power. In the quiet of her chambers, the Queen allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The galaxy outside could remain unchanged, rigid in its hierarchy and fear, but within this moment, she had glimpsed a different way to see the universe, and it had come from a human. Marcus, unaware of the profound effect he had caused, prepared for the next day. There would be negotiations, discussions, and formalities, but in his heart, he knew that the first step had been taken. A human had spoken honestly, a queen had listened, and the galaxy unknowingly had shifted slightly on its axis. The encounter marked the beginning of something extraordinary, not a war, not a rebellion, but a connection that transcended species, culture, and fear. And as Marcus slept that night, he did so with the quiet satisfaction of a human who had done exactly what humans did best: seen the truth, spoken it plainly, and in doing so, changed the course of events without even trying. The day after the council meeting began with an unusual tension. The massive hall, which had echoed with authority and dominance the day before, now seemed quieter, almost hesitant. Delegates from dozens of species shifted uneasily in their seats, whispering among themselves. Eyes kept darting toward the human delegation, as if expecting a sudden, unimaginable act. Yet Marcus Hale and his team remained calm, quietly reviewing their notes and listening. The council reconvened under the vast dome of the chamber, where banners of conquered worlds fluttered gently in the artificial breeze. The Queen entered as always, her armor reflecting the light in dazzling patterns. But Marcus noticed something different. Her movements were measured, almost hesitant. The courtiers noticed it too, exchanging nervous glances. Rumors and whispers began circulating even before the Queen spoke. The first to speak was a delegate from the Xyler Dominion, a species known for their sharp claws and sharper tongues. They leaned forward and hissed, "Your Majesty, perhaps it is unwise to allow such audacity. A human dares to speak freely without bowing, without fear. This is improper." Humans were not considered equals in these halls. They were known as survivors, clever and adaptable, but unpredictable and to many dangerous in their unpredictability. Yet here was the Queen subtly praising their honesty. Marcus remained seated, calmly observing. He had expected whispers and glares. He had not expected endorsement. But he also understood the delicate balance. Humans survived not because of fear or dominance, but because of perception. And right now, perception was shifting. The next hours were filled with routine deliberations, treaties, and procedural speeches. But the shadow of the previous day hung over every word. Delegates found themselves glancing at Marcus, wondering what other audacity the human might display. Some feared a trick, others feared the truth. During a break, a senior advisor from the Krail Empire approached Marcus. The Krails were a proud species, covered in crystalline scales that refracted light with every movement. "Human," he said in a low voice, "be careful. The Queen's curiosity is dangerous. You have unsettled centuries of tradition. Many species are watching you, and not all will forgive." Marcus watched him go, knowing that the seeds of change were already being planted. Meanwhile, the Queen's private chambers were a flurry of quiet discussion. She had summoned her closest advisors to review the human delegation's conduct. "They speak freely," one said, "without fear, without submission. That is not how civilizations survive. How could they survive against us?" To them, the humans' audacity was dangerous because it threatened the order of the galaxy. To the Queen, it was fascinating because it challenged her assumptions. She had ruled by fear, intimidation, and conquest. Humans did not bow to fear. They thrived because of respect, cooperation, and honesty. It was a concept alien to her, yet undeniably effective. In the afternoon, the Council reconvened for the most critical session of the gathering, the proposal for a unified galactic trade pact. Delegates from multiple species spoke in long, complex terms, trying to assert dominance and secure advantage. The Xyler delegate, still seething from Marcus's previous audacity, addressed the Queen directly. "Your Majesty, shall we allow this human to speak on matters of trade? He has no fleets, no resources, no authority." He spoke slowly, choosing his words with precision. "Your Majesty, honorable delegates, humanity may not have the largest fleets, the strongest armies, or the oldest civilizations. But we have learned one thing above all: cooperation creates strength. Alliances built on trust last longer than those built on fear. Respect allows civilizations to thrive even when power is not absolute. Humans endure because we see value in individuals and understanding and innovation," he continued. "We believe in adaptation, not intimidation. And we have learned that honesty is more powerful than deceit, that respect is stronger than fear, and that courage is stronger than control." Authority had always been maintained through demonstration of power, intimidation, and conquest. Now a human, standing calmly, spoke of values that had sustained his people for centuries, and no one could refute them. After Marcus finished, a murmur swept through the chamber. Some whispered admiration, others disbelief. But the Queen, silent for several long moments, finally spoke. "This human is unusual, and yet his words are true. Perhaps there is wisdom in seeing differently. And perhaps that alone demands attention." They had done what humans always did. They had spoken the truth, and now they waited to see how the galaxy would respond. That night, the Queen did not return immediately to her private chambers. She lingered in the observation gallery, overlooking the city of her capital world. The lights sparkled like a sea of stars, a reminder of everything she had conquered. And yet her mind dwelled on the human who had dared to speak freely in her presence. She touched the polished surface of her armor and thought of Marcus's words. Cooperation creates strength. Respect allows civilizations to thrive even when power is not absolute. For the first time in centuries, she considered a question she had never asked herself. What if power could be measured differently? What if fear was not the ultimate currency in the galaxy? She felt a flicker of something new, curiosity, perhaps even excitement. It was unsettling but not unpleasant. Meanwhile, Marcus and his team reviewed the day's events. They understood that they had not just survived the council, they had subtly shifted perceptions. The human envoy's audacity, his honesty, and his calm respect had created ripples that would be felt across the galaxy. But Marcus also knew the delicate truth: change is rarely welcomed without resistance. Some species would resent humans for this disruption. Some would attempt to exploit it. But Marcus remained confident. Humans had always survived, even thrived, against impossible odds. And this was only the beginning. As the city outside twinkled with lights, the Queen's private advisors continued to debate. "Your Majesty," one whispered, "the human is dangerous. He has unsettled centuries of order. Perhaps it is a mistake to encourage him. Perhaps it is time to see the galaxy differently, through eyes unclouded by fear." He had dared to see her not only as a ruler, but as a being. And in doing so, he had begun to change the rules of the game. Marcus, meanwhile, retired to his quarters, unaware of the profound influence he had already exerted. He wrote in his journal, recording the events of the day. Simple words, honest reflections, and quiet observations. It was a human way of understanding the universe, and it was how humans thrived. Through reflection, through learning, through courage without arrogance. The galaxy, vast and ancient, continued to turn. Fleets moved, treaties were negotiated, and rivalries simmered. Yet in the heart of the council, one human envoy had spoken a truth that could not be ignored. One human had shown that bravery, respect, and honesty could influence even the most powerful queen in the galaxy. And one human had reminded the universe that survival was not only about strength or conquest. but about seeing differently, thinking clearly, and daring to act with integrity. And so, the stage was set. The council would continue, challenges would come, and the galaxy would watch closely. But one thing was certain: humans had made their mark, and the Queen herself was beginning to see that the greatest power was not always in fleets or weapons, but in perception, honesty, and courage. The human envoy had not yet changed the galaxy, yet, but he had begun the first ripple. And ripples, when they gather, could become waves that no empire could ignore. The days that followed the council meeting were filled with tension, anticipation, and quiet observation. Marcus Hale, the human envoy, had expected whispers, glances, and perhaps some quiet hostility. What he had not expected was the wave of curiosity that seemed to ripple across the galaxy's most powerful rulers. Even Queen Elthara herself seemed changed. Though her armor still gleamed like liquid steel and her gaze retained its authority, there was something new in her movements, an openness to consider perspectives other than dominance. Humans were not warlike in the same way most species were. They did not always rely on raw strength, overwhelming fleets, or centuries of hierarchy. They survived by understanding, by ingenuity, and by seeing opportunity where others saw limits. Marcus knew that these traits would soon be tested. The galaxy was vast, competitive, and suspicious. Some species would welcome the human approach, others would challenge it. Marcus had to be ready for both. The next council session began with the usual formalities, but tension lingered like a shadow over the chamber. Delegates from the dominant empires entered, each accompanied by their advisors, their guards, and sometimes their personal weapons, though openly displayed. The Xyler delegate, still angry from Marcus's previous audacity, strode to the front, claws tapping against the polished floor. He began with a speech that dripped with condescension. "Your Majesty, the humans speak of ideals of respect and cooperation, yet they are untested in true conflict. They have yet to prove themselves. It is measured by adaptability, ingenuity, and the ability to act when others hesitate. Humans have endured against civilizations stronger than their own because they do not see limits. They see possibilities." She nodded slightly, subtly acknowledging the truth in his words. The rest of the session was punctuated by debates and proposals, but Marcus's words continued to echo in the minds of every species present. Delegates whispered among themselves, debating whether humans were merely clever or truly dangerous in their unpredictability. Meanwhile, the Queen invited Marcus to meet her privately after the session. In her private chambers, the Queen's expression was unreadable at first. Her armor gleamed softly in the dim light, reflecting the intricate carvings of her empire's history. "You speak with confidence," she said finally. "And yet there is no arrogance in your tone. You do not try to dominate. You do not try to manipulate. They lack fleets to match our own, armies to crush rivals. How do you endure? In a galaxy filled with betrayal." Most of her empire's allies and enemies viewed humans as small, clever, but ultimately irrelevant. Marcus, however, was changing that perception, not with force but with honesty and insight. That evening, a crisis erupted. Reports arrived from the outer systems. A rogue fleet of mercenaries, long thought disbanded, had begun raiding colonies near the galactic frontier. They were known for their brutality and cunning, and the council immediately convened to discuss a military response. Many expected the Queen to command a full fleet strike, overwhelming the mercenaries with sheer force. But she hesitated. She had observed Marcus, noted the way humans relied on strategy and adaptation, and now she wondered if there was another way. The Queen summoned Marcus and his team. "I want your assessment," she said. "How would your people respond to such a threat?" "Your Majesty, if we respond with brute force, we risk escalating the conflict. We might destroy some mercenary ships, but we will also reveal our full strength and intentions. Instead, we could isolate key leaders, use communication networks to spread misinformation, and create opportunities to divide them. The goal is not just to win, but to end the threat with minimal risk and loss." "Prepare a strategy," she said finally. "We will act as you suggest. I want to see if your methods work." He suggested using holographic decoys to confuse the mercenary fleet, intercepting their communications, and offering selective negotiations to create distrust among their leaders. At first, many of the advisors were skeptical. They had fought battles all their lives with fleets, weapons, and intimidation. Subtlety and strategy were foreign concepts. But Marcus's calm explanations, backed by human experience, slowly convinced them. The plan was executed carefully. Small human and alien teams acted in coordination, sending false signals and manipulating the mercenary fleet's perception of strength and vulnerability. Key leaders were isolated, communication lines intercepted, and misinformation spread. The mercenaries, believing themselves betrayed and outmaneuvered, began to fracture. One by one, ships surrendered, leaders fled, and the threat dissolved without a single massive battle. The Queen observed the operation with awe. She had expected humans to struggle without the massive fleets of her empire. Instead, she saw ingenuity, adaptation, and strategic thinking prevail where raw power would have risked war. For the first time, she realized that humans did not need dominance to survive. They could influence events in ways others could not imagine. When the operation concluded, the Queen summoned Marcus again. "You have proven that strength is not always measured in fleets and weapons," she said. "Your methods, they are effective. I admit I had doubts. Perhaps the galaxy has underestimated your people. Perhaps it is time to see differently." But the Queen's endorsement carried weight. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be considered, a species capable of shaping events in ways previously unimaginable. Back in the human delegation's quarters, Marcus reflected on the events. The operation had succeeded without bloodshed, diplomacy had been respected, and humans had proven their worth not by force but by intelligence and courage. It was a clear demonstration of what humans had always believed. Survival depended not on domination, but on perception, creativity, and action. That night, the Queen stood on her observation platform, armor gleaming in the starlight. For centuries, she had ruled with authority, control, and fear. She had conquered worlds, commanded fleets, and faced countless threats. Yet after observing humans and working with Marcus, she realized something profound. There was more than one way to wield power. Influence, strategy, and trust could be just as formidable as fleets and armies. Her thoughts returned to Marcus's words. "Strength is not always in what you can destroy, but in what you can achieve." She repeated them silently, letting the idea take root. For the first time, she considered the possibility that humans, small, unassuming, and seemingly fragile, could teach her something about leadership, strategy, and vision. Meanwhile, the galaxy itself began to shift. Fleets, ambassadors, and advisors who had doubted humans now watched more closely. They had witnessed ingenuity triumph where force might have failed. And one small human delegation had proven that survival, influence, and respect were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist and even flourish together. The stage was set for the next challenge. The galaxy had seen what humans could accomplish in strategy and diplomacy. The Queen had seen how their ingenuity could complement her authority. But the universe was vast, and greater tests were yet to come. Fleets would challenge, rivals would scheme, and the unpredictable human ability to adapt and inspire would continue to be a game-changer. Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. Humans had shown their worth, and now they had allies who saw their value. The Queen had begun to respect them not merely as diplomats, but as partners. And in a galaxy where survival often meant domination, humans had proven that courage, intelligence, and honesty could shift the balance in unexpected ways. For the first time in centuries, the Queen considered the possibility that humanity was not just a small species to be tolerated, but a force that could redefine the galaxy's understanding of power. And Marcus, as he prepared for the next council session, understood the simple truth that humans had always known. Survival, influence, and achievement came not from fear or intimidation, but from ingenuity, honesty, and the courage to act differently than anyone else. The galaxy was quiet for only a moment. News of the human envoy's ingenuity and the Queen's cautious endorsement had spread like wildfire. Some species were impressed, others were angry, but all had taken note. Humans were no longer the quiet survivors on the fringe. They had shown they could influence events and shape outcomes. For Marcus Hale and his team, the calm was deceptive. Intelligence reports began arriving from multiple systems. A coalition of alien empires, threatened by the growing influence of humans, had begun mobilizing. Fleets from the Xyler Dominion, the Krail Empire, and several smaller alliances were converging on a strategically important system near the Galactic Rim. The message was clear: test humanity and perhaps remind the galaxy that small species could be crushed. The council convened in emergency session. Queen Elthara entered, her armor gleaming brighter than ever under the chamber lights. She did not look anxious. She looked focused, prepared, and aware. Her advisors and generals began debating war plans in rapid-fire exchanges, but she raised a hand. Silence fell. "Enough," she said calmly. "We will act, but not by following fear alone. We will act as humans might act, using strategy, intelligence, and adaptability. Lieutenant Marcus, you will lead the planning." "Your Majesty, we must first understand the coalition's intentions, strengths, and weaknesses. They will likely attack with fleets they believe superior, expecting humans to falter under pressure. But we will create opportunities where others see only threats. Humanity survives by doing what others do not expect. We will exploit assumptions and turn them into advantage. They will underestimate us, and that is their first mistake." Marcus suggested small, precise strikes, diversion tactics, and misinformation campaigns to divide the coalition. His plan was not to destroy fleets outright, but to manipulate perception, confuse leaders, and force mistakes that humans could exploit. Many advisors were skeptical. "This is not a traditional strategy," one said, claws tapping nervously on the table. "If we fail, we will lose entire sectors." "Very well," she said. "We proceed as you suggest, begin deployment." Marcus coordinated with the Queen's fleet commanders, deploying small, human-led strike teams to create false signals, spread misinformation, and secretly intercept communication lines. The first engagement came unexpectedly. A coalition scouting group approached a strategically important asteroid belt. They assumed it was lightly defended. Marcus, however, had placed decoy ships, stealth teams, and hidden sensors among the rocks. As the coalition entered, the sensors triggered simulated fleet movements and false signals, making it appear as though a larger force awaited. The coalition commander hesitated, unsure of the true situation. By the time he decided to advance, the humans had intercepted communications and sent disinformation directly to key officers, creating confusion and mistrust among the coalition ranks. They turned on each other, blaming mistakes on one another. Ships retreated or surrendered without a single direct battle. The Queen observed from the command bridge, her armor shining under the lights. "Remarkable," she murmured. "Humans do not fight the way we do. They fight with perception, cunning, and patience." Orders were delayed, mistakes were repeated, and divisions grew. Marcus used these opportunities to execute small, targeted operations, disrupting supply lines, isolating leaders, and creating mistrust. The coalition, expecting overwhelming force, found themselves ensnared in strategy they had never anticipated. The Queen called a council of her closest advisors. "The humans are showing us a new way to achieve victory," she said. "We have fleets, weapons, and centuries of conquest, yet they have achieved this without large battles. They have shown ingenuity, adaptability, and courage. We would be wise to learn from them. The coalition will face challenges they do not understand, and we will exploit those gaps." The coalition expected battles of fleets and weapons. Instead, they found themselves struggling against strategy, adaptability, and ingenuity. During a critical moment, a coalition admiral attempted to ambush the Queen's flagship. Marcus anticipated the maneuver. Using a combination of diversionary tactics, decoys, and rapid redeployment of smaller ships, he created the illusion of a massive fleet ready to intercept. The coalition admiral, fearing overwhelming force, retreated. Not a single human or Queen's ship was lost. Queen Elthara observed the operation and allowed herself a rare moment of admiration. "They think humans are small, fragile, and unimportant," she said quietly. "Yet we see them adapt, innovate, and achieve what our fleets could not accomplish with brute force. Perhaps I have underestimated them for too long." His focus remained on strategy, anticipation, and coordination. The coalition, frustrated and humiliated by the repeated failures, began to consider negotiation. Their leaders, who had expected to crush a small human delegation and intimidate the Queen, now faced unexpected defeat. Mistrust, confusion, and fear of being outmaneuvered forced them to consider peace rather than further escalation. The Queen called a meeting with Marcus after the coalition retreated. "You have done what many would have thought impossible," she said. "Without a single massive battle, you have neutralized a coalition of empires. Your methods, they are remarkable." It was about using intelligence, perception, and adaptability to survive. Humans do not need to dominate to succeed. We find solutions others overlook. Perhaps it is also about ingenuity, courage, and perspective. Humans were no longer just survivors. They were problem solvers, innovators, and unexpected strategists. That night the Queen stood alone on her observation deck, looking out at the stars. Her armor gleamed under the starlight, a symbol of power, history, and conquest. Yet her mind dwelled on the humans she had observed. Small, unassuming, yet capable of shifting events in ways she had never imagined. For the first time, she considered that humanity was not just a species to tolerate. They were a force that could change the way the galaxy understood power, strategy, and survival. Marcus, meanwhile, reflected on the events quietly. Humanity had not used overwhelming force, vast armies, or centuries of dominance. They had relied on observation, ingenuity, and courage. And in doing so, they had shown that being underestimated could be a weapon. They had survived where others might have failed, and influenced allies and rivals alike through clever action rather than intimidation. The galaxy had begun to shift, subtly but unmistakably. Fleets were repositioned, alliances reconsidered, and perception of humans transformed. Species who had once ignored or mocked humans now watched carefully, realizing that survival and influence were not always measured in fleets or weapons, but in clarity, ingenuity, and the courage to act when others hesitated. The Queen finally allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps humans are more than I thought," she said quietly. "Perhaps they can teach us something about strength, strategy, and survival." Humans had proven that they could survive, influence, and even triumph against overwhelming odds. And the Queen, once unyielding in her authority, now looked to them not only as allies, but as teachers of a new kind of strength. Marcus knew that challenges remained. Rivals would test, fleets would advance, and the unpredictable galaxy would continue to demand adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. But humanity had proven the principle. Strength was not always in force, but in perception, action, and the willingness to act differently than anyone else expected. And so, the human envoy prepared for what was to come. Greater challenges awaited, but one truth was undeniable. Humans had reshaped expectations, challenged assumptions, and begun to influence the galaxy in ways that no one, not even the Queen, could have predicted. The galaxy had shifted. Fleets repositioned, alliances reconsidered, and whispers of human ingenuity and courage spread faster than any military dispatch. Marcus Hale and his delegation had achieved what few thought possible. A small species had influenced the decisions of empires and survived where brute force might have failed. Yet Marcus knew the greatest challenge had not yet come. The Queen's advisors reported that remnants of the coalition, humiliated and desperate, were preparing one final attempt to assert dominance. They were gathering all available fleets for a coordinated strike against the outer systems where humans and their allies had operations. It was a decisive moment. The humans had proven their strategy could work, but the coalition's response would be swift and merciless. Queen Elthara summoned Marcus to her private chambers. Her armor gleamed under the soft lighting, but it no longer seemed like a barrier of intimidation. It seemed almost ceremonial, a symbol of leadership tempered by insight. "The coalition will strike soon," she said, her voice calm but firm. "They will not forgive what has been done. We must prepare. We will need every advantage, intelligence, flexibility, and decisiveness. We can turn their aggression into their own weakness." Marcus and the Queen's fleet commanders devised strategies that combined the humans' ingenuity with the resources of her empire. Small strike teams would disrupt supply lines, create illusions of overwhelming strength, and manipulate enemy perceptions. Larger fleets would appear in one sector while secretly reinforcing vulnerable points elsewhere. Misinformation would be broadcast through intercepted channels, making coalition leaders doubt each other and their own plans. For the first time, many of the Queen's advisors witnessed humans orchestrate a plan not through sheer power, but through foresight, observation, and coordination. Some were skeptical, others could not help but admire the clarity of thought and the calm confidence Marcus exuded. The human delegation had demonstrated a new kind of strength, one that relied on intelligence and courage rather than intimidation. The coalition's attack came on a quiet, seemingly ordinary day. Sensors detected fleets advancing toward the outer system, each expecting a decisive battle that would crush humans and their allies. The coalition believed they had the advantage, their numbers overwhelming, their commanders confident in centuries of experience. Marcus observed the situation calmly from the command bridge of the Queen's flagship. "They expect us to respond predictably," he said to the Queen. "We will give them the opposite of what they expect. That is our strength." Communications were intercepted and subtly altered, sowing confusion among coalition leaders. Key officers began questioning orders, some withdrawing prematurely, others diverting resources unnecessarily. The first confrontation appeared almost accidental. A coalition fleet, attempting to flank the outer defenses, entered an asteroid field carefully prepared by Marcus's teams. Sensors simulated the presence of hidden ships, and electronic countermeasures masked real positions. Coalition commanders believed they were under ambush, but in reality they were trapped in carefully calculated positions. Their movements became hesitant, uncoordinated, and fearful. Marcus watched quietly. "They are overestimating what they see and underestimating what we control," he said. "Perception is our ally. Humans do not fight like us, and yet they prevail." The coalition, expecting easy victory, found themselves outmaneuvered and humiliated without ever engaging in a large-scale battle. As the final pieces fell into place, Marcus coordinated the last phase of the operation. Human teams cut off escape routes for the remaining coalition leaders while simultaneously securing key systems. Communication lines were controlled to ensure misinformation reached the correct ears, further destabilizing enemy coordination. By nightfall, the coalition had collapsed. Fleets retreated in disarray, surrendering to avoid complete destruction. Queen Elthara summoned Marcus once the operation concluded. She regarded him with a mixture of admiration and something more personal, genuine respect. "You have done what no one expected," she said softly. "Your people, they survive, influence, and even triumph where others rely on force. You have changed the way I see the galaxy. We survive and thrive by observing, adapting, and acting decisively." Humans were no longer seen as minor players on the galactic stage. Their actions had demonstrated a new kind of power, one that relied not on overwhelming force, but on intelligence, strategy, and courage. Stories of the human envoy's leadership and the Queen's collaboration spread rapidly, challenging assumptions and reshaping perceptions. In the days that followed, the Queen made a historic declaration. She acknowledged humanity as a respected species in the Galactic Council, not because of their fleets or numbers, but because of their ingenuity, courage, and the integrity they displayed in their dealings. Allies and former rivals alike watched in surprise as the Queen spoke. Humanity had earned not just recognition, but influence. Marcus reflected on the journey. From the first meeting, where he had spoken honestly about the Queen's armor, to the successful operation against the coalition, humans had relied on qualities that defined them: observation, adaptability, ingenuity, and courage. They had influenced powerful rulers, challenged assumptions, and proven that respect and intelligence could achieve what brute force could not. The Queen invited Marcus to a private audience once more. She removed her ceremonial helmet, revealing a face marked by centuries of leadership and experience. "Lieutenant Marcus Hale," she said, "your people have changed the way I see leadership, strength, and the galaxy. You have shown that courage, intelligence, and honesty are more powerful than intimidation. You have my respect, and more importantly, you have my trust. Humanity survives not to dominate, but to contribute, to adapt, and to act wisely. We have learned that respect, observation, and decisive action can achieve more than fear ever could. Perhaps we should see potential where we once saw weakness, and value ingenuity as much as force." The HFY message was clear. Humanity did not need overwhelming force to influence events. They survived, thrived, and reshaped perceptions through courage, intelligence, and honesty. In a private moment, the Queen reflected on the journey. She had faced countless threats, ruled over countless systems, and commanded entire fleets. Yet it had taken humans to show her a different kind of strength. One that relied not on intimidation, but on ingenuity. Not on fear, but on respect. Not on domination, but on perception and action. Marcus, back in his quarters, wrote in his journal. He described the operations, the decisions, and the subtle victories that had turned the tide. He did not record glory or personal triumph. He recorded lessons, strategies, and insights. This was the human way, to observe, reflect, and act wisely. Humanity had proven that survival, influence, and achievement could be accomplished without violence, without domination, but with courage, ingenuity, and honesty. The galaxy, vast and complex, would never be the same. Humans had reshaped assumptions, challenged the old order, and demonstrated that small, unassuming species could wield influence in ways previously unimaginable. The Queen had acknowledged their value, the Council had accepted their presence, and the Coalition had learned that humans were not to be underestimated. The story ended not with destruction, but with transformation. The humans had survived and influenced the galaxy, not through weapons or fleets, but through observation, insight, courage, and respect. They had proven the core HFY principle. Humanity's greatest power lies not in domination, but in ingenuity, honesty, and the ability to see possibilities where others see limits. And in her chamber, Queen Elthara touched the smooth surface of her armor one last time. It had once symbolized fear and conquest. Now it symbolized partnership, understanding, and the new order the galaxy would come to recognize. Marcus Hale looked to the stars, aware that this was only the beginning. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy, had proven its value, and had changed the way rulers, empires, and civilizations thought about strength. The future was uncertain, but one truth was clear. Humans, small and underestimated, had made an impact that could not be ignored. And in the quiet of the observation deck, with stars stretching endlessly in every direction, the Queen and the human envoy shared a silent understanding. Strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the smallest voice speaking truth can change the course of the universe.